Well, hello there. I'm here to talk to you about more arrays. And by that, I mean, if we can get past that awkward image of me, what I want to do really is look at some more examples of what we can do with arrays in our programming. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to think about this idea that there are three main ways that we can use arrays. There may be more, but I'm going to pitch it as three. The first way is this idea that we collect a whole lot of different but related objects into a single array so that we can deal with them all at once. So if we have a bunch of fish objects, we can put all of the fish objects into a single array, and in that way we can kind of move all of the fish objects at once, and we can draw all of the fish objects at once, and the array keeps everything neat and tidy, and it enables us to do things at scale. But there's a couple of other things we can do with arrays that are worth looking at. The first one is it can be useful to pick a random element out of an array. That's often something we want to do, is we have a collection of data, all of the elements in the array, and we want to just choose one random thing. So I want to look at a couple of examples of that. And we might also want to take advantage of the fact that an array is storing its data, the elements in the array, in order, right? Starting at number 0 and moving on from there. So the fact that they're in order might be something that we want to do something with. So that's the objective here in talking about more arrays. And I'm going to do this just by looking at a series of examples. So let's begin with an example of random selection. So here's a program, an empty program. And what I want to do is I'm going to make a fortune teller. And the way that I'm going to make a fortune teller is that I'm going to have an array that's going to contain a bunch of sort of fortune cookie style fortunes, and I'm going to choose a random fortune from that array and display it to the user, and that's going to be how my fortune teller works. So to do that, I'm going to do something which is I'm going to have an array called fortunes. I'm going to store an array in there. And rather than beginning with an empty array, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start the array with all of the fortunes in it, because I'm going to know what they are ahead of time. So for example, it's not looking so good, and you will trip over Brad Pitt today. That might happen. And what else? You are going to enjoy gum. Goodness me, that's pathetic. Happiness is yours for the taking. You will meet David Lynch. Whatever. I mean, these fortunes can be anything. Let's not get too involved with this. So the idea here is that our array contains a series of fortunes. Each one of those fortunes is a string of text. And you can see that they're separated by commas here. Now I'm writing this array with my fortunes at 1 on each line because that's a nicer way to format it. I could have put them all just comma separated in one long line, but that would be harder to read, and it's much, much nicer to give them some space like this. So we have the square brackets that signify an array, and then we have the first fortune, it's not looking so good, and then a comma, and then the next fortune, you will trip over Brad Pitt today. If I could only be so lucky, and then a comma, and then you're going to enjoy gum, my worst fortune ever, comma, etc. Okay? And the other thing that I'm going to need, if I'm going to choose a random fortune, is that I'm going to need a variable to store the chosen fortune in. So chosen fortune. And I'm going to do a kind of a trick here, which is I'm going to say, click to see your future. I'm going to have an instruction in the fortune to begin with, and that way when I display it at the beginning of the program, they're going to see click to see your future, the user is, and when they click, they're going to get one of these fortunes, okay? So let's do some standard setup. Create canvas, 600 by 600 is my new fave. I'll set some basic text properties, center, and a text size of 32, and a fill of 255 because I'm going to make the background black background, and I'm going to display the chosen fortune on the screen in the center. So at the beginning, when we go look at our program, it says click to see your future. Now if I click, nothing's going to happen because I haven't implemented anything. But that's the basic idea. So now all I need is my mouse pressed function, right? This is what's going to happen when they click. And what I'm going to do is very simple. what I want is I want to put a random fortune from this array here into this variable, and then it will be displayed when they click. So I know that I'm going to need to assign something into chosen fortune. So then the question is, how do I get a random element out of this array? And there are different ways to do this, but we're lucky in P5 that, in fact, the random function, random, normally we're used to putting numbers in here, right? Like give me a random number between 0 and 255 or something. But it turns out that if you want to, you can give it the name or a variable with an array in it, and it will return a random element. So that's exactly what we want, right? Sometimes it's going to return the Brad Pitt one, sometimes it's going to return the David Lynch one, sometimes it's going to return the Gum one. We don't know which, that's how the random function works. So random past the fortunes array is going to put a random fortune into chosen fortune when I click, and because in draw I print out chosen fortune, the result is that when I click, I find out that I'm going to meet David Lynch today. I'm running out of time, to be honest. I'm recording this reasonably late in the evening, but you never know. Because this is in mouse pressed, I can keep clicking to get different fortunes if I want to get something better than meeting David Lynch, which I don't think is possible. But maybe I want to trip over Brad Pitt, so I keep clicking until I get that one. Okay, but the basic idea, the basic sort of pattern here is you have an array of random things, in this instance strings, that you want to pick from. You have a variable that you're going to store the result in when you actually pick. And then to put a random result into that variable, you use random, and then you pass as an argument the array. Simple as that. Okay. The other thing I talked about using with an array is this idea that it's sequential, that the order matters. So with our fortunes, we didn't really use this idea of the array being in order because we were choosing randomly. But now let's actually take advantage of that. So I'm going to keep a few of these things just because I'm going to work with text again. But instead of fortunes, and let me delete these fortunes here, I'm going to have an array which is going to be, goodness, can I spell this? I believe so. Soliloquy. Hamlet's soliloquy, the classic, right? So it's going to have lines from that soliloquy, to be or not to be. That, as you may well know, is the question. Don't forget my commas. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows. This is a great speech of outrageous fortune, outrageous fortune. Or, and this is my favorite bit, to take arms against a sea of sorrows, and by opposing end them. Probably some of the punctuation's a bit off there, but it's a great part of a great soliloquy. So here the order matters, right? Because this is a speech, and these lines are in order. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of sorrows, and by opposing end them. And I will be accepting my job at the Royal Shakespeare Company any day now. So we've got a soliloquy. Now, what we want to do is display lines from this soliloquy one by one, right? To do that, you might think that what we want is a variable that's going to store the line in it, and that we would somehow change that variable to pick the next one. But if you think about what's changing when we go from line to line, it's really the index, right? The number, the address of the line. This is at index 0, this is at index 1, this is at index 2. So what we really want to do is track that number. Go from 0 to 1 to 2. So what we want to track is the index. So let's have a variable that tracks that, the current index, and I'm going to start it at 0 because that is the first one. Now in draw, I know what I need to do, at least for this first step, which is I need to display some text. And what the text I want to display is the soliloquy at the current index. So at the beginning, which is right now, that's going to be 0, so it's going to be soliloquy at index 0. That's going to be or not to be. So let's make sure that this bit works before we carry on. To be or not to be. Now, this doesn't do anything, but what I would like is I would like to be able to click, and when I click, I go forwards one line. So how do I do that? Well, it's pretty simple. When I click, I need the current index to go up by 1, just like that. That's going to do it, right? click, 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 click. Because it's going up by 1, I'm displaying each subsequent element in the array. What happens when I reach the end? They disappear, which is not perfect, because what's happening is that current index is going past the end of the array. It's a larger index number than the length of the array, and therefore it's reaching these undefined values, which are then not being displayed on the screen. It's not terrible, but what I might want is that I want to stop on the last line, so you can't keep advancing. So how do I enforce that? I'm going to need an if statement. If current index. So when will I know that I've reached the end? Well, if I've just advanced the current index, then I would be at the index that is the same as the length of the array, soliloquy.length. Because the length of the array, remember, is 1 after the highest index, because we're counting from 0. So for instance, soliloquy is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines long. So this is index 7. So if we reach index 8, which is the length of the array, we've gone too far. And so we would need to go back by 1. So if that happens, we're going to set current index to be soliloquy.length minus 1. So go back by 1 and stay on the final line of the soliloquy. So then, to be or not to be, etc., etc., etc. I won't bore you. And now I'm clicking, but it's stuck on the end, which is perfect. That's good. So we'd stay with the ending line. The other thing that we could do that is reasonable, and sometimes it's what you want to do, is if we wanted to go back to the beginning when we reach the end, we would set current index to 0, right, which is back at the start. That's all the way back at to be or not to be. So when we reach the end, go back to the start. Infinite Hamlet loop. Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing, up to you. So this is how we can do something sequentially with an array, right? An array with stuff in it where the order matters, like the order of a speech, and we keep track of which of those we are currently wanting to do something with. In this case, the one that we're wanting to display. We start at 0, and then we advance this current index variable by 1 each time. So we start at 0, then we go to 1, into 2, etc., which we're doing in mouse pressed here by adding 1 to current index. And if we want to be tidy, we should do something when we reach the end of the array, either go back to the beginning or stop there. It's a tidy little program that takes care of that. Okay? So let's continue on. Obviously, you can take a break at any point. You're not obliged to stay with me. This is a very kind of modular series of examples, so it's not crucial that you are sticking with me. So let's write another program. It's going to be a bit more of a classic. I think you're familiar with my circles at this point. I'm going to draw a class. I'm going to be daring, and I'm going to draw a circle of size 100. And what I want to do is I'm going to make my circle follow the mouse. So we know that we can do that by setting its position to the mouse location. And I'm going to do that. Circle.y, circle.size. Perfect. So then I have a moving circle. Lovely. But what I would like to do is maintain a trail behind this circle. So what I want to do is remember all of the previous positions that the circle has been in, and I want to draw circles at those positions as well. And importantly, I'm going to need to remember this in order. So I want to remember them in the order that they're added. So over time, I can build up this trail. Now, clearly, the solution to this trail is going to be an array. So I'm going to store the positions of all of the previous locations of the circle in an array. So where should I do that? Well, to this point, I've generally been making my arrays separately, but there's nothing stopping me, and indeed I shouldn't, from making a property of my circle that starts out as an empty array. And this is what we're going to add all of our past positions to. So how would we add our past positions to this? Well, each time we draw the circle, we should remember where we drew it. So let's say new trail position is going to be my variable, and its x is going to be whatever circle x was, and its y is going to be whatever circle y was. So when they change, I'm remembering where the circle was, and I need to add this to my array. And this is where push comes in handy again. So circle.trail, that's the array, right? It starts off empty. Push new trail position. So let's add this trail position, this most recent position into the array. And importantly, with push, we're adding it to the end of the array. So the most recent position is going to be at the end of the array. This means that when we are going to try and draw all of these positions, we'll start at the beginning of the array. That'll draw the oldest first, and then we'll draw all the way up to the most recent. So how do we draw the oldest first? Well, I guess, where do we want to do this drawing? I think we could do this drawing maybe just before we draw the circle. So how do we go through an array in order? We use a for loop. And traditionally, we start with a variable called I that starts at 0. That's the very beginning of the array. And we're going to go through the entire array's length. So from 0 up to the length, sorry, but it's while I is less than the length, otherwise that's not going to work at all. And I goes up by 1 each time. So it starts at 0 and counts up. Now, just for simplicity, let's pull out the position in the array at that location. So circle.trail at the index of I, the element at that index. So again, it starts at 0, so that's going to be the earliest position. And then let's just draw an ellipse at that position. Position X, position Y. Now that position doesn't have a size, so let's just use the circle size here. Okay. So every time through draw, we're going through our trail array and we're drawing the full trail that our circle has been leaving behind. How are we building up that trail? By adding the most recent position onto the end of our array with push. What do we get? This, a trail. Look at that. So this is very different, right? Because previous to this experience, we have, oh, that's better. We have not, and so this is, I'm noticing something about this, but I won't bore you with it right now. We've not been able to do this kind of trail and have the background change. So now we can. Let's generate a random number between 0, well, maybe not 0, 200 and 255. See, now this trail is being left on top of a changing background. So we can replace the background. That's very powerful. One thing that's a problem, though, is that we are remembering every position that the circle has been in, every frame for the duration of the program, and the program is going to slow down because we are trying to remember an awful lot. This is not a super productive thing to do. So what if, and I'm just going to change this back to 0, rather than trying to remember the entire history of the circle, which, it is an interesting thing to do, but maybe it's a bit excessive. What if we wanted to limit the length of our array so that we don't store too many parts of its history? Well, the first thing that we would want to do is we would want to set our limit. So let's say trail size. And let's say that it's going to have 20 elements in it. And then we need to place limits, right? So just after we've added the most recent position onto our trail, we need to check if it's gotten too long. So we would want to say if circle.trail.length, which is the length of our trail, so we've just added one, is it greater than circle.trail size, which is the maximum. So if it's become larger than that, so trail size is 20, right, up here. So if we add one and we get up to 21, what do we need to do? We need to remove a position from our trail. But we don't want to remove just any position, not a random one, and we don't want to remove the most recent one because then we're forgetting the thing that we just remembered. We want to remove the oldest one. We want to forget the one at the very beginning of the array at position 0, at index 0. And there's a special function related to push that does exactly that. So it applies to the array, right? So circle.trail, and it's called shift. Okay? Circle.trail.shift. Shift will remove the element at index 0 and reshuffle the array so that everything is now starting from 0 again, but without that first element. So it kind of shunts that element out of the array and renumbers everything. So shift. Shift it off. And what does this do? Now we only remember 20 positions, and so we just get a trail. Oh, God, I got a bit too excited there. I am quite excited. The trail is left behind, and it's this perfect memory of where the mouse has been. You can see it doesn't just draw a trail. It's like it's remembering even the style of movement that I've used, right? So faster, the trail moves faster; slower, it moves slower, etc. It's Very nice. I'm sorry, but that's very nice. Now you can thank me later. Okay. So that's another thing we can do. Again, this is relying on the fact that an array is in order, right? We're relying on the fact that the oldest trail position is at the beginning, and it goes all the way up to the most recent trail position. So that's pretty nice. Let's do a couple more things. I suppose I don't have to. That's probably a little excessive. Let's leave that there. Let's go back to randomness. Let's go back to randomness and randomly doing things. Let's use that idea with sound. Okay, so let's say, and I know that for a fact that I do have this, that I have a barking dog sound effect, right? In which case I need to load it in preload by saying bark sfx is assigned load sound, and then the path, which is assets sounds bark.wav. And let's say I want to play this barking when I click the mouse. So let's do that. So bark sfx.play. Great little program. Let's check it out. Woof, woof. Woof, woof. Woof, woof. Okay, perfect. Now, what if I wanted this to sound like the dog was singing? Classic thing. Everybody wants to write a singing dog program at some point, and this is the point where I want to do it. So how do I do that? Well, there is a function that sound files like bark sfx can use called rate. And what rate does, so let's do it, bark sfx.rate, is it changes the rate, the playback rate of your sound. So if I set it to 2, for example, then the dog's bark is going to play back twice as fast, and it's also going to be elevated in pitch. So, different kind of a dog. Already maybe suggests some potential of singing. So maybe what your brain would then jump to is like, oh, well, if I want it to sound like singing, which means I want a kind of variance in pitch, maybe I could just use a random number. A random number between 1 and 3, let's say. What does that sound like? Works, but it sounds very random, like too random. It doesn't sound like there's a real relationship between the different barks. They're just all over the place. So this is where we might want to control the randomness a bit. Rather than random, a completely random number, what we want is a sort of controlled random number in here. And we're going to do that by using, guess what, an array. So what we can do is we can create an array that contains a set of different rates that we want to play our barking back, but only a limited set, right? I'm now using some numbers that I thought worked reasonably well when I was playing around with this idea earlier. So these are the different rates I want to use. Notice there's a limited set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's only 6 different ones, right? So when we play back random barks at these different rates, we're going to have a much more kind of consistent sound because we're going to hear repeated notes and they're going to seem like they're in relationship to one another. And here, at this point, we can just use our little trick that we already know about. I'm going to get a rate variable, and I'm going to get a random element from the rates array. So that's going to give me 1.5 sometimes, 2.5 sometimes, 3 at other times, etc. And then I can set my rate to that. Maybe I should call it random rate. That would be a better name. Random rate. I'm going to use that rate when I play back, right? So now I'm only going to get dog barks from a random one of these rates, and that's going to sound a lot better. Thank you very much. So that is a barking dog sing-along. Okay? Just another little thing, right? We're using randomness to kind of control, have a more controlled randomness by using an array of data. Okay, one last thing, and then I swear I'll let you go. Just going to delete a couple of things like I like to do. I don't need that. So one of the classic things that we might want to do is we might want to load some images and then choose a random one to display. It's a solution to all kinds of potential things. It's a bit like the fortune teller, right? Except with images instead of strings. And I've got some pre-prepared images here that I want to use. So I've got clown 0 is green, clown 1 is kind of purpley, clown 2 is sepia, very saturated, white, etc. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to load all of these images, and I'll load them into an array, and then I want to choose a random one and display it. Pretty simple. So let's start. So the images array has to start empty because I can't load images outside of preload, right? And then I'm going to also need the image that I actually want to display, which I'll choose in setup once I've loaded all of the images. So how do we load them? Well, that's kind of what you would expect. We're going to just put them in one by one. Load image assets, images, clown-0.png, and then we're going to do this over and over again, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. Gosh, this is boring. I think you can maybe guess that I'm going to need some kind of solution to how boring this is. But for now, let's just carry on. That one's 4, that one's 5, that one's 6, that one's 7, that one's 8, and then we get up to 9 because there's 10 of them, right? And we're counting from 0. Perfect. Then in setup, I just want to choose a random one, right? So display image is assigned, use random to choose a random image from the images array. And then in draw, I'm just going to display. Probably I should use push and pop because I'm a professional. I'm going to display the display image and as always in the center of the canvas because that's classy. Okay, so when the program runs, one of these randomly inserted images is going to show up. Sepia clown. I'll reload. Desaturated clown. Sepia clown. Hypersaturated clown, etc. So that's good. So this is that's just a simple thing, right? We can display a different clown every time. But it gives me an opportunity to talk about something maybe more important, which is this. This doesn't look good, right? We are loading images, but we're doing really the same thing every time, except that this one is 0, and this one is 0. This one is 1, and this one is 1. 2, 2, 3, 3, etc. And we know what the solution to this is. We need a for loop. So let's use one. Let's think about how to do this. So a standard for loop. Now, what are we going to count up to? We need to count up to the number of images, which is 10. Now, what are we going to do? Well, we can say images at position I is assigned load image. Sorry, I'm getting a bit lost there. Assets, images, clown. Which clown, right? So what do we do here? We know that when we do the first one, it should be 0. Second one should be 1. So we can just use the value that's inside I, right? That starts at 0 and then goes 1, 2, 3. So we can use our fancy $ curly brackets and use whatever is in I. First time through, that's going to load clown 0. Second time through, it's going to load clown 1, and so forth. And that lets us get rid of all of that. No matter how many images we have, we'll be able to make this for loop. We'll just do the job. It didn't do the job. What have I done wrong here? Oh, it's a missing S in images in that case. Okay. And it's just working, right? Blue tint, normal-ish, sepia, sepia, sepia. Oh, sepia is like on the rise. Completely bleached out white, etc. We could also do this in other ways. We could, for example, say let clown image equals load image, and then we could use push images.push clown image. That's also a nice way to do things. That's completely fine too, and that will work as well. Perfect. Okay, so this is just it's a really good point, and remember and note that the only reason this works is because of the way that I've named my files here, right? Starting with 0 and then numbering them sequentially, but otherwise keeping the file name exactly the same. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. So that's all of the examples I want to look at for arrays. You can see that they're very powerful. They let us collect related elements into one place. With a for loop, we can do stuff to all of those elements at once. Such as loading these images here, for instance. But we can also do things like we can randomly access them, as we do down here, so that is potentially interesting to get a random element from a controlled set. And as we saw with the trail and with Hamlet, we can also access the things in our array sequentially. It really depends on what we're trying to achieve. And that's it. I hope that you enjoyed these kind of extensions on what arrays are for. I think you can see that they're one of the most powerful things that we have access to in programming. They really come up a lot, and I hope that you will enjoy them forever and ever and ever. Amen. See you in the next video. Bye for now.